Under the pale morning light of New York City, Maya Rivera adjusted the strap of her delivery bag as she approached. Hudson Tower, the mirrored facade of the skyscraper, reflected a sky still streaked with lavender and gray, a calm illusion that belied the chaos unfolding in her chest. She muttered under her breath, a pep talk for no one but herself. Get in, drop the bag, get out, easy, no awkward conversations, no drama. You've done this 100 times, Maya. It's just another delivery. But her gut warned her that nothing about today would be ordinary. As she stepped into the lobby, her sneakers squeaked against polished marble, the sound amplifying in the cavernous space. She tugged the brim of her cap lower, hoping no one noticed her, especially not the security guard eyeing her badge with faint disinterest. Maya moved with practiced speed toward the elevator bank. Then she froze. Across the lobby, leaning casually against the coffee station like he belonged there, was Ryan, her ex. The man whose persistence after their breakup had evolved from mildly irritating to full-blown unsettling. He looked exactly the same: expensive coat, phone in hand, that smug expression like the world owed him an apology. Maya, he called out, his voice carrying a forced warmth that made her skin crawl. Hey, wait a second. I just want to talk. Her instincts screamed. She bolted, turning down the nearest hallway without a plan, her delivery bag bouncing against her hip. Her breaths came quick and shallow. She had no time for his rehearsed apologies or his inevitable attempt to rewrite their history. And then, like a scene from a movie she would have laughed at any other day, she collided with a man standing at the end of the corridor. He barely moved, though she staggered back a step, clutching her bag as if it were a lifeline. "We're sorry," she whispered, too frazzled to look him in the eye. The man's expression didn't change. His slate-gray eyes regarded her with mild curiosity, his posture so composed it seemed unnatural. He was tall, sharply dressed in a navy suit with sleeves neatly rolled to reveal strong forearms. Even without knowing his name, she could sense power radiating from him, like he was a permanent fixture in this building. Before he could respond, Maya heard the echo of Ryan's shoes drawing closer. Panic surged in her chest. "Please," she whispered to the stranger, clutching her bag tighter. "Don't say a word. Just pretend I'm not here." And without waiting for permission, she crouched low and ducked beneath the edge of the conference table behind him, folding herself into the narrow space like a cat seeking refuge. The man stiffened but didn't move. "Excuse me," he murmured, glancing down as she hugged her knees to her chest. 30 seconds. "That's all I need," Maya whispered back, her forehead nearly brushing against the pristine fabric of his tailored trousers. "I swear I'll be gone. It's complicated." The man's brow furrowed, but before he could question further, Ryan's voice rang out from behind them. "Hey man, did you see a girl run by? Red hoodie, ponytail, kind of in a rush." The stranger paused, glancing toward the hallway. Then, with a calmness that unnerved even Maya, he said, "She headed for the elevators. Looked like she was in a hurry." Ryan let out an annoyed sigh. "Figures, thanks." His footsteps retreated, fading until silence settled over the room again. Maya let out a breath. She didn't realize she'd been holding. Slowly, she unfolded herself and rose to her feet, brushing imaginary dust from her jeans. Her cheeks burned as she finally dared to meet the man's gaze. That was embarrassing. "I'm so sorry. I'm not crazy." Well, not in a dangerous way. That was purely survival mode. Like a bad scene from a spy movie, or maybe a romantic comedy gone wrong. The man said nothing at first. His expression remained unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes, amusement or disbelief. She couldn't tell. Finally, he extended his hand. "Adrian Knight." Maya blinked. The name registered like a THUNDERCLAP. Adrian Knight, CEO of Knight Innovations, billionaire. The man whose face occasionally graced the covers of Forbes and Wired, though he was infamous for avoiding public appearances. "Oh no," she whispered. "Of course it's you. Because the universe clearly enjoys humiliating me in front of high-profile tech moguls." Adrian's lips twitched. "I've had stranger meetings." "Really? No? Fair?" She took his hand hesitantly, her palm sweating against his cool, firm grip. Maya Rivera, delivery driver, occasional accidental stuntwoman, an unusual combination. "You have no idea." She offered a nervous laugh. "Listen, I swear I'm not usually this chaotic. I'm not sure I believe you." "That's fair." She shifted from foot to foot, suddenly hyper-aware of the delivery bag still hanging from her shoulder. "Anyway, thanks for not exposing me to the guy I was trying to avoid. You didn't have to do that." "Apparently I did," Adrian said, his tone as even as his expression. Maya tilted her head. "Do you always talk like you're negotiating a merger?" He ignored that, studying her with an intensity that made her fidget. Then, as if reaching a silent conclusion, he picked up his tablet and handed it to her. "I'm in need of a temporary assistant, someone who thinks quickly under pressure, someone unconventional." Maya stared at him. "You're joking." "I don't joke. You don't even smile." "I do, occasionally." She blinked, trying to read his face for any hint of humor. "Are you serious? You'd offer a job to a random delivery girl who just crouched between your legs? Your crisis management skills are unique. I'm curious to see what else you're capable of." Maya laughed nervously, then stopped when he didn't. "You're really serious, aren't you?" "Deadly." She chewed her lip, glancing toward the lobby doors where Ryan had disappeared. "Okay, but just so we're clear, if this involves spreadsheets, I can't promise not to hide under a table again. I'll add that to the job description." Maya exhaled sharply, unsure whether to laugh or run for her life. "Well, Mr. Knight, I guess I'll see you tomorrow. 9 a.m. Don't be late." She nodded, still dazed, and backed out of the room. As she hurried to the elevator, her heart pounded for reasons that had nothing to do with Ryan and everything to do with the fact that she'd just accidentally landed a job with New York's most enigmatic CEO, and she had no idea what she was walking into. The morning sun cut through the steel and glass skyline of New York as Maya Rivera stood at the entrance of Hudson Tower, clutching the strap of her oversized bag like a lifeline. It had been 24 hours since she'd impulsively agreed to work for Adrian Knight, and already her nerves felt frayed. She had spent the night oscillating between panic and determination. Panic because she wasn't remotely qualified to be anyone's assistant, let alone for one of the city's most powerful CEOs. Determination because she wasn't about to let a once-in-a-lifetime chance slip away. As she rode the elevator up, she caught her reflection in the mirrored panels. Her hair was pulled back neatly enough, and she'd chosen a navy blouse that said professional rather than desperate. But the little voice in her head still whispered that she didn't belong here, in this sleek high-tech fortress where people probably scheduled their smiles and conversations. The doors opened to the 18th floor, revealing a reception area so pristine it seemed untouched by human hands. Maya stepped out and was immediately met by a woman with perfect posture and a clipboard. "You're here for Mr. Knight," the woman said, her tone efficient but not unkind. "This way." Maya followed, her sneakers squeaking faintly against the polished floor. The office spaces they passed were open and minimalistic, humming with quiet productivity. Everyone seemed to glide through their tasks as if on rails. She, in contrast, felt like she was crashing into an orchestra mid-performance with no idea what instrument to play. Adrian Knight's office door was already open. He was seated behind his desk, sleeves rolled up, blazer draped casually over the back of his chair. He looked up as she entered, his expression calm but inscrutable. "He came back," he said simply. "I wasn't sure if you expected me to." Maya admitted. "I don't expect anything, I observe." She wasn't sure what to make of that. Adrian gestured toward a chair across from him. "Sit." She did, trying not to fidget. "Your role is temporary," he began, folding his hands together. "I need someone adaptable, quick to respond under pressure, and capable of handling logistical chaos." "Chaos?" she asked, a little too quickly. "That's practically my middle name," noted. His tone didn't shift, but she caught a flicker of something in his eyes, mild amusement. "Perhaps. Your first task, organize these." He slid a stack of files across the desk. Maya's relief was short-lived. As she gathered them up, a few sheets slipped from her grasp and fluttered to the floor like rebellious birds. "Sorry," she muttered, bending down to collect them. "First day jitters. First day gravity test," Adrian said dryly. She blinked at him, unsure if he was joking. He didn't look up from his tablet. By mid-morning, Maya was attempting to navigate the company's scheduling software when she accidentally sent a meeting-confirmed email to the wrong department. The reply came swiftly and included a smiling catchif. She groaned, burying her face in her hands. "Trouble?" a voice asked. She looked up to find a young man with glasses and a friendly expression leaning on her desk. "Javier, interface analyst." he said, offering her a piece of strawberry candy. Maya, temporary disaster. Don't worry. Everyone's a disaster their first week. He winked before walking away. At least not everyone here was made of ice. When the video conferencing system crashed during an important client call, Maya's panic returned. Adrian was seated at the head of the conference table, calm as ever, but she could see the subtle tension in his jaw. "Give me a minute," she said, rushing to the panel. "You're not trained for this." "I'm trained in improvisation," she shot back, fingers flying across the keyboard. She bypassed the system and connected Adrian's tablet directly to the projector with a paperclip and sheer stubbornness. The screen flickered back to life. "Well done," Adrian said after the meeting, his voice even but softer somehow. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. Efficiency over elegance. At lunch, Adrian surprised her by suggesting they step out for food. "You could eat in your executive dining room," Maya said as they walked toward a small cafe near Central Park. "You could have let the system crash," Adrian countered. "Yet here we are." It was oddly quiet as they waited for their order. Maya, never one to let silence grow too heavy, spoke up. "Do you ever relax? Or is this whole unflappable thing a permanent feature?" "Relaxation is overrated." Spoken like a man who's never binge-watched cooking shows at 2 a.m. He actually looked at her then, a flicker of curiosity passing over his features. "You talk a lot. Compulsive habit. Helps me fill awkward silences." "Effective," he said, almost thoughtfully. Back at the office, Maya was sent to organize a supply closet. As she sorted boxes, she caught her reflection in the glass door. She still didn't feel like she belonged here, but she was trying. Adrian passed by, pausing at the doorway. "Progress depends. Do you want this organized alphabetically, by color, or by which boxes are most likely to fall and crush someone? Use your best judgment." She smiled to herself as he walked away. By the end of the day, Maya was exhausted, but oddly exhilarated. She'd survived. More than that, she had begun to sense the faint outline of something unexpected here. Something that wasn't just a paycheck. She didn't know what it was yet. But as she gathered her things, she found herself hoping she'd have the chance to figure it out. The sky over New York was a muted gray as Maya Rivera stepped into the gleaming lobby of Hudson Tower, clutching her travel mug like a talisman. She had only been Adrian Knight's assistant for 2 weeks, but every morning still carried the electric thrill of walking into a world she had never imagined for herself. It wasn't just the glacé steel grandeur of Knight Innovations, or the fact that she shared space with people who seemed effortlessly brilliant. It was Adrian himself, his precision, his quiet intensity, and the way he seemed impervious to the ordinary chaos of life. She was beginning to wonder if there was anything that could rattle him. That thought lingered in her mind as she stepped into the elevator with Adrian later that afternoon, heading to a client meeting across town. At the Empire State Building, he was dressed in his usual crisp navy suit, the scent of cedarwood and something faintly metallic clinging to him like a second skin. Maya, holding a leather folder with notes for the meeting, stole a glance at his profile. "You always look like you're heading into battle," she said, breaking the silence. "I prefer to think of it as strategy," Adrian replied without turning. "Same difference." The elevator hummed as it rose, a soft mechanical sound that underscored the stillness between them. Maya tapped her fingers nervously on the folder. "I should warn you," she added, "I'm not great with heights. You're in a city of skyscrapers, which is why I live on the 3rd floor of a walk-up." His lips curved in what might have been the barest hint of amusement, but before she could confirm it, the elevator jolted sharply and came to a dead stop. The lights flickered, then steadied on a dim emergency setting. Maya grabbed the railing instinctively, her heart leaping into her throat. "Please tell me this is a scheduled drill," she said. "It's not." Adrian pulled his phone from his pocket, his expression calm, though his eyes narrowed slightly. "It appears to be a power outage." "Perfect. Just perfect." She exhaled slowly, willing herself to stay calm. "We're stuck in a glass box 40 floors up. I've officially entered my nightmare scenario." Adrian pressed the emergency button. Nothing happened. He tried again, then shook his head. "The system's down." "You're awfully calm about this. Panic doesn't change outcomes." "That's a very Knight thing to say." He arched a brow at her. "Knight thing? You know, controlled, logical, emotion-free. Like a polite robot, I see. You don't seem offended." "Should I be? Most people would be." "I'm not most people." Maya leaned her head back against the wall, trying to breathe through the tightness in her chest. Her gaze drifted to the glass walls of the elevator, the city sprawling endlessly below them. "Are you claustrophobic?" Adrian asked. "No, just not great with being stuck." She forced a laugh. "I get twitchy in traffic jams too." He regarded her quietly for a moment. "Tell me something. Distract yourself." She blinked at him. "You're asking me to talk. It seems to be your specialty." "Fair enough." Maya shifted her weight and let out a slow breath. "Once upon a time, I was supposed to be an artist. I got into a design program in Florence. Full scholarship, studio apartment, the whole dream package. What happened? My mum got sick. Stage 3 breast cancer. She didn't ask me to stay, but I couldn't leave her." The words came out more easily than she expected, but her chest tightened as memories stirred the late nights in hospital waiting rooms. The silent terror of test results, the weight of putting her own life on hold. "She passed last year," Maya continued softly. "By then, I had missed my window. My portfolio was outdated. Employers weren't impressed with a 2-year gap, filled by freelance gigs and caregiving. So now I deliver coffee and bagels, and hope no one asks about my 5-year plan." The elevator was quiet except for the faint hum of the emergency lights. Maya risked a glance at Adrian, expecting him to look politely detached. Instead, his gaze was fixed on her with an intensity that made her pulse jump. "You made a choice most people wouldn't have," he said at last. "That isn't failure. I didn't say it was, but it feels like the world sees it that way." He nodded slightly, as if understanding something he didn't say aloud. "You hide it well," Maya added, surprising herself. Adrian tilted his head. "Hide what? Whatever your chaos is, you seem like someone who's trained to keep it locked up tight." For the first time, his expression softened not much, but enough to suggest the faintest crack in his armor. "When I was 12, my father told me emotions were liabilities, that leaders don't have the luxury of vulnerability. That sounds lonely. It was necessary. Necessary and lonely aren't mutually exclusive." He looked at her then, not with the cool assessment she was used to, but with something warmer, something unspoken. "You're very direct," Adrian said. "Bad habit. I'm working on it." "Don't." It's refreshing. Before Maya could process the shift in his tone, the elevator lights flickered back to full brightness. With a gentle shudder, the car began to move. "Again, well," she said, her voice lighter than she felt. "Looks like we survived." Indeed. They stepped into the Empire State Building lobby moments later. Maya took a steadying breath, clutching the folder tighter than necessary. "You did well," Adrian said, as they crossed the marble floor. "I just stood there talking about myself. You stayed calm under pressure." She gave him a wry smile. Define calm. He didn't answer, but as they entered the meeting room, she could have sworn she saw the corner of his mouth lift just enough to be noticed if you were looking closely. And Maya realized, perhaps for the first time, that Adrian Knight wasn't quite the unshakable machine she had assumed. There was a man behind the polished exterior, and she had begun to see him. The late autumn chill wrapped around Maya Rivera like a warning as she stepped out of the cab and into Greenwich's quiet, manicured streets. She glanced up at the elegant townhouse before her, its windows glowing warmly against the evening dusk. Adrian Knight had invited her here. No, invited wasn't the word. He had asked, with that cool precision of his, if she could join him for dinner with his family, as though it were the most natural extension of her role as his assistant. But nothing about Adrian Knight felt natural. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and frost. She pulled her coat tighter, clutching the small bottle of wine she had bought as an offering. It wasn't the expensive sort people in Greenwich drank, but she'd chosen it carefully, hoping the gesture mattered more than the label. At the door, she hesitated. This wasn't her world. She wasn't a woman of starched collars and fine crystal, but a girl who'd learned to laugh her way through unpaid bills and stretch coffee grounds for a second brew. And yet, here she was, standing on the stoop of one of New York's most powerful families. Before she could knock, the door opened. Maya Rivera. The woman in the doorway was tall and elegant, her silver hair swept into a chignon that defied imperfection. "You must be Adrian's assistant." "Yes," Maya said, offering a nervous smile. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Knight. Call me Sophia." Her voice held no malice, but there was a steeliness in her eyes as they swept over Maya from head to boots, weighing her presence. "Come in." The house was warm, filled with the faint scent of rosemary and garlic. Somewhere deeper inside, laughter bubbled faintly. A man's, rich and unguarded. Adrian's, she doubted it. He emerged from the hallway just as Sophia led Maya in. He looked almost casual, sleeves rolled up, his tie absent, but there was a flicker of something relief when he saw her. Maya, you're right on time. I didn't want to risk being late or early. I spent 15 minutes in a cab debating which would be worse. His mouth curved faintly, almost a smile. This way, Sophia said, steering her toward the dining room. Maya followed, her heart thudding. The room was all warm wood and soft lighting, the table set with understated elegance. At the head sat a man whose face was older but unmistakably mirrored Adrian's Richard Knight. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine. Welcome, Maya. I'm glad you could join us. It's rare we get Adrian to bring anyone from work. Grace Knight, Adrian's younger sister, sat beside their father. She was striking in a softer way than her mother, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She offered Maya a warm smile that eased some of the tension in her chest. Hi, Grace said. Adrian mentioned you've been keeping him on his toes. At the office? Oh no, not really. I'm probably more of a complication than an asset, Maya admitted, then winced at her own honesty. But Grace laughed. You'll fit right in, then. Dinner began with polite conversation. Maya tried to balance contributing without overstepping, answering questions about her background, while skirting details that felt too raw to share here. Sophia watched her closely, not with hostility, but with a quiet curiosity that felt just as unnerving. At one point, the older woman said, So, you've studied art? Yes, graphic design, actually, and now you're an assistant. The words weren't cruel, but they cut nonetheless. Yes, Maya replied evenly. Life isn't always linear. For a moment, Sophia's eyes softened, though her expression remained carefully neutral. When dessert arrived, a delicate lemon tart, Maya found herself seated between Grace and Sophia while Adrian took a call outside. Grace leaned in. You're brave, she said quietly. Maya blinked. Brave? My mother doesn't warm to people easily. And Adrian? Well, he doesn't bring people home. He said it was just dinner, Maya murmured. Maybe to him, but to her, this is something else entirely. Maya's cheeks warmed. I'm not. There's nothing between us. Grace smiled knowingly but said nothing. When Adrian returned, he resumed his seat with the same calm air as always, but Maya noticed the way his hand brushed hers as he passed the breadbasket. Brief, unintentional, yet it sent a ripple of awareness through her. After dinner, Richard cornered Maya near the entryway as she slipped on her coat. Adrian doesn't often allow people close, he said. He was raised to believe leadership meant solitude. But solitude isn't strength, Maya. Sometimes it's just a wound hiding behind discipline. She met his eyes, startled by his candor. You've given him more than you realize, Richard added. On the drive back into the city, silence settled between her and Adrian, but it wasn't the uncomfortable sort. The streetlights painted his face in gold and shadow as he navigated the quiet roads. You handled them well, he said finally. Your family, or the interrogation, both. She smiled faintly. I wasn't sure if your mother wanted to know me or size me up. Possibly both. And your father, he's warm, different from you. Adrian's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. Were not so different as you might think. They pulled up in front of her building. Maya hesitated before unbuckling her seatbelt. Thanks for everything tonight. It was different. Different can be good, he said. She opened the door but turned back. Why me? Why bring me? Adrian's eyes held hers, steady and unflinching. You make things less heavy. Her breath caught. That almost sounded like a compliment. It was, and for the first time since she'd met him, she thought she saw a trace of vulnerability in his expression as, though beneath all the control, Adrian Knight wasn't quite as untouchable as he seemed. The night of the gala arrived with an icy wind sweeping through Manhattan, but inside the Waldorf Astoria, warmth and opulence ruled. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in golden light, and the air carried the faint scent of roses and expensive perfume. Maya Rivera stood just inside the entrance, clutching her small black clutch like a lifeline. Her borrowed gown, midnight blue satin that skimmed her curves, felt both elegant and foreign, as though she'd stepped into someone else's life for the evening. She spotted Adrian Knight across the room almost immediately. He was impossible to miss, standing in conversation with two investors, his tailored suit as precise as the man himself. Even here, in a room filled with New York's elite, He seemed untouched by the nervous energy, the feigned laughter, the endless clinking of champagne flutes. Her heart thudded as she took a step forward. She reminded herself this wasn't a date. Adrian had been careful with his words when asking her to attend as my assistant. Your presence will be useful for introductions, nothing more. But then she remembered the way his gaze had lingered on her when she walked into his office earlier that day, his expression unreadable, but not indifferent. Maya. His voice pulled her from her thoughts. He was suddenly beside her, his presence steadying in the whirlwind of movement around them. His eyes scanned her from head to toe. Just for a moment. You look appropriate for the occasion. She raised a brow, amusement flickering in her eyes. That almost sounded like a compliment. Night, it was, he admitted, his tone quieter now, and she thought she saw the ghost of a smile. As the night unfolded, Maya kept close to Adrian's side, introducing herself with polite smiles, jotting down names in her mental Rolodex, and occasionally whispering reminders about talking points. She wasn't used to the attention she drew, investors' eyes flicking to her with curiosity, colleagues whispering behind perfectly manicured hands. They're watching us, she murmured at one point as they stood near the bar, Adrian sipping his scotch with a kind of measured grace that made even drinking seem strategic. Let them do they think where she faltered, unwilling to finish. Adrian's gaze slid to hers, steady and unreadable. It doesn't matter what they think, it matters to me. I don't want to be the punchline of some corporate rumor. You won't be. His voice held a quiet finality that surprised her. As the string quartet transitioned into a soft waltz, couples drifted to the dance floor. Maya took a sip of her champagne and tried to ignore the pang in her chest. She had never been the kind of woman to glide across a ballroom floor, and certainly not in a room like this. Dance with me. She nearly choked on her drink. Excuse me. Adrian extended a hand, his expression as calm as ever. It's expected. Expected by who? Are there gala police I should be worried about? Expected by our audience. Appearances matter. In environments like this, right? She hesitated, then slipped her hand into his. But just so you know, I don't waltz. I step on feet. I'll adjust on the dance floor. Adrian's hand settled lightly at her waist, and Maya tried to ignore the heat that flared there. They moved slowly, carefully, her fingers resting on his shoulder as though touching glass. You're not bad, he said after a few moments. High praise, coming from you. I was expecting a critique about my form and timing. Only if you asked for one. She tilted her head, watching him. You're different tonight, softer. His eyes flicked to hers, a fleeting vulnerability crossing his face before it disappeared behind his usual composure. I'm not as different as you think. Maybe not, but you let me in more than most, don't you? Silence stretched between them, the music swelling around their unspoken words. I don't let people in easily, Maya. It's not in my nature. I know. She smiled faintly. But maybe I'm not most people. His lips curved barely, but it was there. Maybe not. When the music faded, they remained still for a beat too long. Hands still joined. Eyes locked in a fragile moment neither of them dared name. It was broken only by the flash of a camera, and the polite applause from nearby tables. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly as he led her off the floor. Pictures? Maya asked softly. It's nothing. But his tone carried the weight of something unsaid. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of handshakes and polite conversation, yet every time Maya felt Adrian's hand at her back, guiding her through the crowd, she couldn't ignore the charged undercurrent between them. Later, in the back of the car, the city lights streaked past in a blur as Maya watched Adrian from the corner of her eye. He seemed lost in thought, his usual mask slipping slightly. You were different tonight, she said again. You said that already, because it's true. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Perhaps you bring out a different version of me. Is that a good thing? I haven't decided. Maya laughed softly, turning back to the window, but a warmth bloomed in her chest, undeniable and terrifying all at once. When the car stopped in front of her building, she hesitated before opening the door. Thank you for tonight, she said. It was necessary for the company. Right? Strictly professional. She tried to keep her tone light, but something tightened in her throat. As she stepped out, Adrian called her name softly. Maya. She turned. You were more than adequate. It wasn't a declaration, but in Adrian Knight's language, it felt dangerously close. The morning after the gala, Maya Rivera stepped into Hudson Tower with a cautious optimism that felt almost foreign. The night had left her with a strange sense of weightlessness, as if she'd been walking along the edge of something she didn't dare name. She still felt the echo of Adrian's hand on her back, the soft press of his fingers guiding her across the ballroom floor, and the way his eyes had lingered on hers in that infinitesimal pause before they had stepped apart. But the moment she reached her desk, the atmosphere shifted. Javier glanced up from his workstation, offering her a tentative smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Sophia's sharp heels clicked against the floor with more purpose than usual as she passed by, and the whispers began. It didn't take long for Maya to discover why. The photo from the Galatha, one of her and Adrian mid-dance, faces so close. They seemed caught in a private orbit, had gone viral within the company. Someone had snapped it just as Adrian's hand adjusted at her waist. His face softened with what could almost be mistaken for tenderness. The headline circulating in hushed tones wasn't subtle. Night and the mystery assistant, more than just business. Maya felt her stomach twist as she scrolled through the article on her phone. It was speculative fluff, but it carried just enough truth to make her chest tighten. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't wanted to become a narrative. She had almost convinced herself it would blow over until Sophia stopped by her desk. "Mr. Knight, we'll see you now," Sophia said, her voice carefully even. Maya gathered her courage and entered his office. Adrian was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, his silhouette carved in light and shadow. He didn't turn when she walked in. "You've seen it?" he asked. "Yes." Her voice was small but steady. "I've spoken with legal and PR. We'll issue a statement clarifying your role. That I'm your assistant," she said, more bitterly than she intended. "That you're an employee and nothing more," he corrected, his tone flat. Maya flinched. "Do you really think people will believe that? After that photo?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter what they believe. What matters is protecting the company's reputation. That all this is to you, optics." He finally turned, his expression unreadable. "This isn't about you, Maya. It's about the consequences of perception." Maya swallowed the rising sting in her chest. She should have expected this. Adrian Knight didn't do entanglements, didn't invite chaos into his carefully calibrated existence. "So what happens now?" she asked quietly. "You'll no longer report directly to me. Sophia will handle your assignments." The words hit harder than she expected. "You're cutting me out. I'm reallocating resources." "Don't you mean people?" He said nothing. Maya forced a tight smile, though her hands trembled. "Thank you for clarifying, Mr. Knight." As she left his office, her chest felt hollow. She moved mechanically through the rest of the day, fielding polite stares and whispers. She could no longer pretend not to hear. The work she loved, managing Adrian's impossible schedule, anticipating his needs, putting out fires before they started, was handed off piece by piece to Sophia's team. By mid-afternoon, she couldn't take it anymore. She walked back into Adrian's office without knocking. "This isn't fair," she said, her voice low but sharp. "You're punishing me for something I didn't do." He didn't look up from his laptop. "I'm making a decision that benefits the company. You're making a decision that protects you." Adrian's fingers stilled on the keyboard. "You're scared." Maya pressed on. "You're scared because for 5 minutes on a dance floor, you let the world see that you're human. And now you're shutting me out so you can go back to being untouchable." His eyes flicked up, cold and distant. "You're overstepping." "Maybe," she admitted, "but I'm not wrong." Adrian closed his laptop slowly and folded his hands. "I can't afford distractions." "Then I won't be one," she said, her voice breaking as she unclipped her ID badge from her lanyard and placed it on his desk. "You won't have to worry about me anymore." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Maya turned and walked out, her step steady even as her chest caved in with each breath. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Adrian remained seated, staring at the badge on his desk, like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. For the first time in years, he felt the faintest trace of regret cut through his perfectly ordered mind. But he didn't move. Maya didn't look back, not once. And as she stepped out into the biting wind of Fifth Avenue, she told herself it was for the best, even as her heart ached with the hollow weight of things left unsaid. The first week after leaving Night Innovations felt like stepping off a moving train. Maya Rivera wandered her small Brooklyn apartment, surrounded by unopened boxes and reminders of a life she was no longer part of. The badge she had handed back to Adrian sat on her kitchen counter, its lanyard curled like a question mark. She had planned to toss it into a drawer but couldn't bring herself to. It wasn't just a plastic card anymore, it felt like a piece of her she didn't know how to reclaim. That days blurred together in muted colors. She filled her time with freelance projects, small design gigs for local coffee shops, social media campaigns for a yoga studio, work that paid the bills but didn't challenge her, didn't set her heart racing the way navigating Adrian's world had. Every time her phone buzzed, she hoped it might be him. It never was. On a grey Thursday afternoon, Maya ducked into her favorite cafe to escape the biting wind. She was halfway through answering emails when a familiar voice broke her focus. Maya. She looked up. Grace Knight stood there in a wool coat, a surprised smile tugging at her lips. Grace. Maya rose awkwardly, unsure if she should offer a hug. May I? Grace gestured to the empty chair across from her. Of course. Grace sat, studying her with the same quiet intelligence Maya remembered from their dinner at the night house. I didn't expect to see you here. Or, not here, exactly. Not out of the company. I didn't expect it either, Maya admitted. Grace nodded thoughtfully. Adrian hasn't been the same. Maya's chest tightened. He's fine. He always is. Grace's smile was tinged with sadness. You'd be surprised. Grace, I appreciate your kindness, but if you're here to convince me to go back, I'm not. Grace interrupted gently. I just thought you should know. He works later than ever now. Doesn't talk much. Barely eats. She hesitated. He keeps your workstation exactly the way you left it. The mug, the notepads, everything. Maya looked down at her hands, twisting her coffee sleeve. He made his choice, and I made mine. Grace studied her a moment longer. You didn't just change his routine, Maya. You changed him. After Grace left, Maya sat in silence, the words echoing through her mind like a song she couldn't stop humming. That night, she stared at her phone for hours. Finally, she typed out a message to Adrian, her thumbs hovering over the send button. I'm okay. I hope you are too. She deleted it before she could second-guess herself further. 2 days later, Adrian sat alone in his penthouse, a glass of whiskey untouched on the coffee table. He had thought burying himself in work would dull the edge of her absence. But it hadn't. The space she'd occupied felt too vast to fill with numbers and deadlines. He scrolled aimlessly through his phone until he landed on an old photo from a team lunch day, only one where Maya had insisted on taking a selfie, laughing as she held the camera too high. She hadn't known he'd kept it. For a man who prided himself on precision, Adrian had been disastrously careless with her. He had miscalculated, assuming cutting her out would restore order. But instead, he found himself adrift, haunted by her voice, her laughter, her quiet defiance that had once driven him mad and now felt like oxygen. The next morning, he opened his calendar and cancelled 3 meetings. It was time to stop running from the one thing that scared him more than failure, admitting he wanted something he couldn't control. That afternoon, Maya returned from a delivery run, the wind turning her cheeks raw. She was juggling her keys when a black car pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and there he was. Adrian. He stepped out into the cold without his usual armor of a pressed suit and tie. Instead, his coat was unbuttoned, his expression unguarded in a way that stole her breath. Maya, he said. She froze. What are you doing here? I needed to see you. You could have called. I wasn't sure you'd answer. She crossed her arms, both for warmth and defense. You made it clear there was no place for me in your world. I was wrong. Her laugh was sharp, brittle. You don't do wrong, Adrian. You do strategy, calculations, risk assessments. Then assess this, he said, his voice steadier. Then he felt, I haven't slept since you left. The office feels hollow. I feel hollow. I thought I could cut you out and keep things in order, but all I've done is lose the one thing that ever felt real. Maya's lips parted, but no words came. You once asked why I brought you into my life, he continued. I told you, it was necessity, but it wasn't. It was because you made me see the cracks I'd spent years covering up. And I need you, Maya, not as an assistant, not as a distraction, as you. She stared at him, her heart pounding so hard, she thought it might crack her ribs. Adrian, you can't just show up and... I don't expect forgiveness overnight. I don't deserve it. But let me start over, not as your boss. As a man who's trying, for the first time, to be worthy of someone like you. Silence hung between them, thick with all the words they hadn't said. Maya's throat tightened. I don't know if I can trust you again. Then let me earn it, day by day. She studied him for a long moment, the Adrian she'd known and the one standing before her overlapping in ways that made her head spin. Finally, she exhaled. Day by day, she whispered, and as he reached for her hand, tentative and unsure, she didn't pull away. The first weeks of rebuilding what had been broken were quiet and tentative. Maya hadn't returned to Hudson Tower, and Adrian hadn't asked her to. Instead, their world seemed to find new ground outside office walls and boardroom tables. On a Sunday morning, they walked side by side through Central Park, their breaths visible in the winter air. Adrian carried 2 coffees, offering one to Maya as she adjusted her scarf. It felt strange to see him like this, dressed in a charcoal sweater and dark jeans, his usual crisp formality replaced with something softer. "You know," she said, taking a sip, "I don't think I've ever seen you without a suit before." "Consider this experimental," he replied dryly, but there was a flicker of humor in his eyes. They found a bench overlooking the frozen lake. For a moment, neither spoke. Birds skimmed across the icy surface, and children's laughter echoed faintly from a nearby playground. "Do you miss it?" Maya asked finally. "Miss what?" "Control. The neat lines. Knowing exactly how your day will unfold." He considered this for a long time. There's comfort in predictability, but comfort isn't always growth. She smiled faintly. "That sounds dangerously close to self-reflection, Mr. Knight." "Adrian," he corrected gently. "When it's just us, call me Adrian." She glanced at him, surprised by the softness in his tone. Adrian, then. His name felt strange on her tongue, but right somehow, like a song she had known in another life. Over the following weeks, they carved out a delicate rhythm. They met for lunch at small cafes, walked aimlessly through streets neither of them had explored before, and talked not about work or crises or deadlines, but about books Maya loved, the paintings Adrian had kept hidden in his study, the memories they both carried like old photographs. And yet, even in the gentleness of their new beginning, there were moments of hesitation. One evening, they sat on the floor of Adrian's penthouse, surrounded by takeout containers and half-finished glasses of wine. The city lights glittered like distant stars beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Do you ever wonder," Maya began, tracing the rim of her glass, "if we're too different?" He looked at her steadily. "Every day, and I've decided difference isn't a weakness. It's what pulled me toward you in the first place." Her chest tightened. "You're so sure now." "I'm not sure of anything," he admitted, "but I know I don't want a life where you're not in it." For a man who had once prized detachment, Adrian's honesty was disarming. Maya leaned back against the couch, watching him with eyes that carried both caution and longing. "I'm scared, you know, that we'll fall back into old patterns, that you'll shut me out again." "I can't promise I won't make mistakes," he said quietly, "but I promise I'll fight harder not to." It wasn't a grand speech. It wasn't poetry, but it was Adrian, plain, unembellished truth from a man who had spent most of his life behind walls. In those weeks, Maya also saw a side of him no one else did. She saw Adrian exhausted after hours spent at the hospital, visiting his father, whose health had grown fragile. She saw him staring at his phone late at night, drafting messages to Grace he never sent. She saw him loosen his grip on the iron bars of his own expectations, and she let him see her too. The Maya who still carried guilt for lost opportunities, who wasn't always confident or graceful, who sometimes laughed too loudly and cried over old movies. One snowy evening, as they walked back to her apartment, Maya stopped on the sidewalk, snowflakes catching in her hair. "Adrian," he turned, his expression instantly alert. "This, us, it's not just about fixing what went wrong, is it?" He shook his head. "No, it's about building something better." She searched his face, looking for cracks, hesitations, but all she found was quiet determination. "Then let's do it," she whispered. Day by day, he stepped closer, brushing a snowflake from her cheek. Day by day. When they kissed, it wasn't urgent or desperate. It was steady, unhurried, like two people choosing each other all over again. Later that night, as Maya curled against him on the couch, she thought about how different this felt. It wasn't a whirlwind or a storm. It was warmth after a long winter, the kind that seeped deep into your bones and stayed there, for the first time. She let herself believe they could make it work, not because they were perfect, but because they were willing. The spring air carried a gentle warmth as Maya Rivera stepped onto the balcony of Adrian's penthouse, the city unfolding beneath her like a living, breathing mosaic. The past few months had reshaped them both, quietly but irrevocably. She no longer felt like an interloper in Adrian Knight's world, and he no longer carried the impenetrable silence of a man consumed by his own fortress. Instead, there was space between them, now space for laughter, for arguments that didn't end in cold withdrawal, for long silences that no longer felt like walls. Behind her, Adrian was finishing a call, his voice measured but softer than it once had been. His business decisions still carried the same precision, but now there was a human texture to him, a light in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Sorry about that," he said, stepping out to join her. "The London team is struggling with their rollout. I may need to fly out next month." Maya turned, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. "Will you take a few days for yourself while you're there? Or is that still an alien concept to you?" He raised an eyebrow, amused. "You're relentless." "I am invested," she corrected, a playful glint in her eyes. He smiled, one of those rare, guarded smiles that had taken her weeks to coax out of him the first time. Point taken. They stood together, gazing at the skyline. The quiet between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was comfortable, like a shared breath. "You've changed," she said softly. "So have you," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "You carry yourself differently now, stronger, like you finally believe in your own place in the world." She thought about that, about how far she'd come from the girl who hid behind coffee runs and self-deprecating jokes. "Maybe I do," she admitted, "and maybe part of that is because of you." Adrian reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "And maybe I'm the man I should have been all along because of you." The words settled between them like a vow. 2 weeks later, Maya found herself standing on a stage at the International Design Conference in Paris, the spotlights making her palms slick with sweat. The room was full, the buzz of anticipation almost deafening. Beside her, Adrian looked composed as ever, though his hand brushed hers briefly in reassurance before they stepped forward. As they presented their joint project, an innovative initiative, blending design and technology for accessibility, felt her nerves give way to pride. This wasn't just Adrian's vision or her creativity, it was the product of their shared resilience, a testament to what could be built when fear didn't dictate the terms. The standing ovation at the end felt surreal. Later that night, they strolled along the Seine beneath the glow of and the faint strains of a violinist on a nearby bridge. Paris was everything Maya had dreamed of years ago, but it was different now, better, because she wasn't alone. "Do you ever think about Florence?" Adrian asked suddenly. She glanced at him in surprise. "Sometimes, but I think Paris has replaced it in my heart." He stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression unreadable in the soft light. "Maya, yes." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. When he opened it, a delicate ring caught the light, simple and elegant, just like the man holding it. "This isn't a gesture of perfection," he said quietly. "It's a promise to keep trying, every day, for as long as you'll let me." Maya's breath hitched. "Adrian, will you marry me?" For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then she let out a shaky laugh, tears springing to her eyes. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." When he slipped the ring onto her finger, it felt less like an ending and more like the beginning of a chapter they had both fought hard to deserve. 5 months later, they stood on a beach in Montauk at sunset. The sky was painted in soft pinks and golds, the waves lapping gently at the shore as their friends and family gathered in a semicircle. Grace stood as Maya's maid of honor, and Richard Knight looked on with pride that was impossible to disguise. Even Sophia, ever composed, dabbed discreetly at the corner of her eye. Maya walked barefoot down the aisle, her dress light and flowing in the sea breeze. Adrian waited at the altar, his suit jacket discarded, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. When she reached him, he took her hands in his. "Maya Rivera," he said, his voice low but certain. "You taught me that love isn't about control or perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. I promise to keep showing up for you, for us, for all the days of my life." Her throat tightened as she replied, "Adrian Knight, you made me believe that I could be seen, fully and completely, and still be loved. I promise to stand with you, through every success and every storm, with laughter, grace, and maybe a little stubbornness." They exchanged rings as the ocean roared its applause, and when Adrian kissed her, it wasn't tentative or cautious. It was deep and certain, a merging of two people who had found their way through the wreckage to something unbreakable. Later, As they danced beneath strings of glowing lights, Maya rested her head on Adrian's shoulder and whispered, "Do you realize we're a cliché? Beach wedding, fairy lights, barefoot vows." He chuckled softly. "Then let's be the kind of cliché worth believing in." And for once, Adrian Knight wasn't planning or analyzing or guarding himself. He was simply present, holding the woman who had taught him that the greatest strength came not from control but from choosing to love. Day after day, as the waves rolled in and laughter echoed through the night, it was clear to everyone watching that this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. A storm had settled over Manhattan the night Maya Rivera received the call that would shatter the delicate calm she and Adrian Knight had built together. She was sitting cross-legged on the couch in their shared apartment, the soft hum of jazz playing in the background as she sketched ideas for a new accessibility app. The faint scent of Adrian's cologne lingered on the throw blanket draped around her shoulders. He was still at the office, working late as usual, though lately his late nights were often punctuated with texts or calls that reminded her he was trying to be present even when duty pulled him away. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Maya hesitated, then answered, "Hello." There was a pause, then a strained, accented voice. "Is this Maya Rivera?" "Yes. Who's calling?" "I'm Dr. Bernard from St. Luke's Hospital. I'm afraid Adrian Knight has been brought in. There's been an accident." Maya's sketchpad slid from her lap, the sound of graphite against paper muffled by the roaring in her ears. "An accident? What happened?" "He was struck by a vehicle outside Knight Innovations. He's stable now, but you should come." By the time Maya arrived at the hospital, rain plastered her hair to her face. The emergency room smelled of antiseptic and fear. She rushed to the nurse's station, clutching her coat tight against her trembling body. "Adrian Knight," she said breathlessly. "I was told he's here." The nurse's expression softened. "He's in recovery. Room 312. Maya ran. When she pushed open the door to his room, her heart nearly stopped. Adrian lay in the hospital bed, pale against the crisp white sheets. His head was bandaged, and his right arm was immobilized in a sling. But it wasn't the injuries that undid her. It was seeing him, Adrian Knight, the man who had always seemed invincible, so fragile, so human. His eyes fluttered open as she approached. "Maya," he rasped. She bit her lip to hold back tears. "I'm here. I'm sorry." She frowned. "Why are you apologizing? This wasn't your fault." But his gaze was shadowed, guilt etched in the lines of his face. "I should have been more careful. I've been distracted lately." "Distracted by what?" His lips twisted in a faint, rueful smile. "You make me want things I never let myself want." "I wasn't watching the street. I was thinking of calling you." Her chest constricted. "Don't you dare blame loving me for this." His eyes softened. "I've never loved anyone like this before. It terrifies me." Maya sat on the edge of the bed, taking his hand gently in hers. "Then let's be terrified together. But you have to get better, Adrian. Do you hear me? I can't lose you." Over the next few days, she rarely left his side. She brought him tea, read aloud from his emails so he wouldn't feel restless, and even learned how to adjust his hospital bed without triggering a lecture from the nurses. But beneath the quiet moments, tension simmered. Adrian's accident had attracted media attention. Paparazzi camped outside the hospital, speculating about his condition and his relationship with Maya. Headlines screamed billionaire, CEO in critical condition, fiancé by his side, even though no engagement had been announced. When Adrian was finally discharged, they returned to find a mob of cameras outside his building. Maya shielded him as best she could, but the questions came fast and sharp. "Adrian, how's your recovery going?" "Maya, are you his caretaker or his girlfriend? When's the wedding? Are you pregnant?" Adrian's jaw tightened as security ushered them through. Back inside the penthouse, he collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion etched deep into his features. "This is why I never let people close," he muttered. "The scrutiny, the speculation, it never ends." Maya crouched in front of him, cupping his face in her hands. "Then let them speculate. What we have isn't defined by their headlines." His eyes searched hers. "You're stronger than me in this." She smiled faintly. "Not stronger, just stubborn." But the truth was, the pressure was beginning to get to her too. Old insecurities resurfaced late at night when Adrian was asleep. Was she really strong enough to stand in his world, to be the woman beside the man whose name carried weight in every corner of the city? One evening, as she stared out the window at the city lights, her phone buzzed. It was Grace. "I know you're overwhelmed," Grace said gently, "but Adrian needs you more than ever. He's terrified, Maya, not of his injuries, but of losing what he's built with you. Don't let fear drive you apart." Maya's throat tightened. "I won't." The next morning, Maya woke to find Adrian standing by the window, his arm still in a sling, but his posture more determined than it had been in days. "I made a decision," he said. "About what?" "About us." He turned, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I don't want to keep hiding. Not from the media, not from the board, not from myself. If we're going to weather this storm, I want the world to know exactly where we stand." Maya's heart stuttered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he took a shaky breath, "I want to marry you, Maya. I want to build a life where no accident, no rumor, no fear can undo what we have." Tears blurred her vision. "Adriana, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet box, opening it to reveal a ring so simple and elegant it stole her breath. "Maya Rivera, will you marry me?" She laughed through her tears. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times." When they kissed, it wasn't gentle or tentative. It was the fierce, unyielding kiss of two people who had survived storms and chosen each other again and again. As news of their engagement broke the next day, headlines shifted, no longer about injury or scandal, but about love that had weathered every obstacle. And in that moment, Maya realized Adrian had been right all along. Control was an illusion. Love, the messy, terrifying, all-consuming kind, was the only thing worth risking everything for.